Well, I'm going to be as brief as possible, so maybe we can jump in with some questions at the end. Um, as I mentioned while I was moderating the table during the morning session, ay, ¿me traes una agua? So we work on innovation and entrepreneurship and the policies that promote them. And after doing that for a couple of years, we started asking ourselves, we're talking about entrepreneurs, everybody mentions them, and nobody knows who they are, especially high-impact ones. So we got a grant from the International Cooperation Agency of the US. It wasn't as large a grant as we would have wanted, but it was good enough to start doing some research on who are the Mexican entrepreneurs and especially the successful ones. So everything you're gonna see in the upcoming slides and what I'm gonna talk about is about the ones that were successful. And I think we actually need to do something similar to the ones that were not. We probably have a lot more to learn from the ones that failed than from the ones that were successful. So the questions we were trying to answer with this small survey, because you're going to see it's very small, it's actually not representative in any way, but it shed some light on who are the Mexican entrepreneurs, why and how did they start their companies, and how did they were able to overcome the obstacles that they faced when they were starting their companies. So what we did is we went to the country's main accelerators, universities, the government. We searched on the news who were the main entrepreneurs in different sectors. And we approached them and we interviewed them. And we did like 2-hour interviews. We interviewed some of the people that are here, like Alejandro Villalón, Juan Vera from Blue Messaging. And I think that there's one more, I don't remember who else, but there's someone else that we interviewed that is here. And then we asked them what were their backgrounds, their family backgrounds, where did they go to school, and that sort of thing. And then we got some conclusions out of that. 2 caveats, it is not representative, as I mentioned, and we were not able to confirm all of the information that we got. So some of the entrepreneurs mentioned stuff that we cannot guarantee it's true, but it's nevertheless interesting. So we interviewed 65 entrepreneurs in different parts of the country. At the end, we only used 35 interviews for the report because some of them showed a lot of inconsistencies that we could not really tell if they were saying the truth at all. In different sectors, mostly IT, green tech, a lot of green tech going on in Mexico, food industry, and many others, but that are probably one case per entrepreneur. So the first thing we found out is something that we had suspected along the way, that entrepreneurs start their companies, these ones, later on in life, after working, after going to school. Everybody thinks of the Mark Zuckerberg or the Bill Gates story, and that actually isn't happening in every day. No? So most of entrepreneurs started their companies between 30 and 40 years old. The oldest guy started at 55. Actually, in the auto industry, he's doing very well. And the youngest one on a video game company at 18. In the case of Mexico, and this is very, very interesting to us, most, if not all of them, were from private schools, either private high schools or private universities. Actually, a high majority on private universities. And that says a lot about the system in Mexico. It says a lot about not only the education system itself, but about how the mobility, that the social mobility that certain classes can have in Mexico, where only if you go to a private university, you may be able to innovate, to start your own company. So that's 2 of the things. And that goes against many of the things that are happening in the policy arena, because a lot of the resources that government's spending on promoting entrepreneurship is going to incubators at the undergrad level. We have 500 incubators. I don't believe any of them are working at all. But still, as I mentioned, we are a policy think tank, so everything we do has that focus as well. What were they doing before they started their companies? Most of them, as you can see, were employees in one way or another. I mean, you can find the future high-impact entrepreneur in any company, in the government. They're not these garage-type entrepreneurs. I'm sure that's changing with the growth of the IT industry, but at least in the ones that we interviewed and we surveyed here in Mexico, they're mostly employees. We've seen these results very similar in the US and in Chile, which both of them had. The Kaufman Foundation actually published, I think last year, a report that has very similar results, although they did have like 300 interviews. And as you can see, even public servants or bureaucrats can do interesting stuff. 51% of them, so 51% innovated in something that's completely different to what they were doing, that had nothing to do with their day-to-day activities. Two of them here, I mentioned two of them. One is Metros Cúbicos. I know someone, yeah, I think you work for them, and the other one's Frecuencia 122.1, which is a company that is actually doing flight simulators for Boeing here in Mexico, and starting as a radio control hobby thing. Many of them do innovate in the related fields, and some of them come from the university, which are in this case the big minority. And this is a very important slide for us, because we always preach that failure is not that bad. I mean, in the case of Mexico, there's this culture, as the previous speaker mentioned, in Latin America, I think in general, where failure is a bad thing, and you only fail once. But what we saw is that actually more than half of the entrepreneurs had failed at least once, and some of them more than that, and that's a big thing, because you have to, in order to promote the ecosystem, you have to promote failure. If you don't promote failure, it means that you're not promoting anything to get started to begin with. I mean, it's a basic thing for many, but in Mexico, it's a huge deal. A lot of them do R&D, although they may be small. Many of them have their own R&D departments. I mean, this was a big question when we did this study, because many of them are not formal R&D departments, but they do some sort of research and development, which is interesting. There is a lot of collaboration, although informally, with the academic sector. Mexico, as I mentioned in the morning, doesn't have this Bayh-Dole Act, which makes it possible to collaborate with public institutions, where most of the high-level research is being done in Mexico, but they cannot profit from it, so it's a huge thing. And many of them collaborate abroad, which is also, I believe, an interesting thing. As you can imagine, the main challenge they faced is access to capital, and mostly it gets solved by their own savings and by government grants, because of the lack of a private capital industry or access to finance in general. That's a quote that's very popular in Mexico. It's probably popular a lot of places, but I just want to mention. And finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, we need to do a lot more research. We don't know really a lot of what's happening. There's a lot of information out there, but nobody is analyzing it. Especially, we need to find out about the ones that are failing. I mean, those are the big lessons, I think. We have to find out about the ones that fail. The profile of the young 19-year-old garage-based entrepreneur may be misleading a lot of the policy that goes on. The incubators is a good example, where you also only get restaurants and small tortilla shops out of that. The opportunities and ideas are everywhere. I mean, there could be a government employee with a huge idea. There could be a corporate executive with a good idea, as well as probably Marcus Dantus from White & Nose. And we have to set up an ecosystem where those ideas can flourish. And Mexico has improved a lot, but still has a long way to go. And then there's a big question about if your education system is not working, creating mobility, and the financial system isn't, are only the wealthy able to innovate? I think that's a huge question that needs to be addressed, because under the status quo, only the wealthy are innovating, and that's only creating a larger divide. And entrepreneurship, instead of reducing the divide between the haves and have-nots, is actually increasing it. And that's a huge issue for an emerging economy. And mentors matter, and matter a lot. I mean, when you talk to entrepreneurs, you ask them, what was the most important thing that happened to you? And it's not the first investor, it's the first mentor. The guy that helped you out, that when you were falling down, helped you get up, and that sort of thing. Government can and is playing actually a role. It could do a lot better, not only in the business environment, but in an active role as an investor, as promoting the entrepreneurship culture and everything. And we need more MitaTechTalks, and this is not a joke. I mean, in a country where the rich drive in their cars and live in their small compounds in the middle of the city or in places like Punta Mita, you don't have those spaces where you can build social capital. It's very different to what happens in industrialized economies, where you get on the subway and the wealthy sit beside a not so wealthy, but it's completely different. So you need to create different environments where the social capital can happen. I know Endeavor is starting to do some sort of that, and with Angel Ventures in Mexico City, doing startup drinks. Well, those things like these ones need to happen. Maybe not in Punta Mita, because not many people can come here, but we need more spaces like that, and the government and the private sector have to promote those spaces. That's basically it. If you have any more questions, please let me know.